There are secrets. And then there are the kind that destroy everything they touch. Tonight's story isn't about murder or ghosts or crimes in the dark. It's about a wedding, a priest, and a daughter torn between love and a truth so forbidden it was never meant to be spoken. Stay with us. What you're about to hear will haunt you long after the screen fades to black. It was a wedding like any other, at least that's what everyone thought. Candles flickered in the dim glow of the cathedral's stained glass. The scent of roses, imported at great cost, lingered in the air. Evelyn stood at the altar in a lace gown that kissed the floor, trembling not from cold, but from the weight of a truth she dared not speak. He was there. The priest. The man who would bless her union, whisper ancient vows, and seal a love he never approved of. No one knew. Not her husband-to-be, Michael, who waited at the other end of the aisle, glowing with naive joy. Not the guests, who cried at the beauty of it all. Not her mother, who had died years ago and left behind a trail of questions no one dared to follow. But Evelyn knew. And so did he. The man in robes. The man of God. The man who was her father. And as he raised his hand in blessing, Evelyn felt the sting of irony cut deeper than any knife. Her life had always been a labyrinth of silences. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, she never questioned why her mother never spoke about her father. He died before you were born, she had said once, tight-lipped, eyes distant. Evelyn believed her. What choice did she have? But sometimes, in the dead of night, she would catch her mother weeping, clutching an old photo torn down the middle. At 15, she found that photo. The edges were yellowed, but she recognized her mother instantly. Beside her, a man in priestly robes. A handwritten note on the back said only "Forgive us." For everything. That was the first time Evelyn visited St. Hildegard's Cathedral. The same place where she'd one day stand in a white dress. The place where secrets buried beneath marble would claw their way to the surface. She never meant to fall in love with Michael. He was gentle, honest, the kind of man who stopped to rescue stray dogs and left tips too big. But the world she came from, woven in lies and unspoken sins, was too heavy to share. So she did what her mother had taught her so well. She smiled. She pretended. She survived. Until the day Michael proposed and she said yes through tears she couldn't explain. The moment she learned who her father really was shattered something inside her. It was 2 months before the wedding. Evelyn had returned to St. Hildegard's hoping to confront the ghost that had haunted her all these years. But the man who stood before the altar wasn't a ghost. He was flesh and blood. Older, thinner, but the eyes were unmistakable. "Do you know me?" she had asked. He had paused only for a breath. "Every day of my life." He told her everything. How he had met her mother when he was just a young priest, freshly ordained, foolish and proud. How passion had overruled faith. How he had begged her mother to leave with him, but she refused, saying the shame would destroy them both. How he had watched from afar as Evelyn grew up, too afraid to break his vows, too guilty to claim what was his. "I was a coward," he said. "And now here I am, about to bless the marriage of the daughter I never held." Evelyn didn't sleep for days. She tried to call off the wedding. But how do you explain to the man you love that the priest who's officiating is your biological father, a man you never knew existed until weeks ago? She couldn't. Michael saw her distress and mistook it for nerves. He kissed her forehead and promised everything would be perfect. "You'll be the most beautiful bride," he said. And she wept. Because beautiful things are sometimes built on lies. The wedding went on. Guests stood and clapped. The organ sang in triumph. Evelyn walked down the aisle, a porcelain smile stretched across her face, each step echoing like a lie. Michael took her hands, so full of warmth and hope. He had no idea that the priest standing before him was not just Evelyn's spiritual guide, but her biological father. And that made Evelyn's skin crawl. But the worst part? He was good at it. The priest. His voice didn't waver. He didn't blink at the vows. He blessed them like it was any other couple. Like he wasn't watching his own daughter promise her life to a stranger. After the ceremony, they posed for pictures. Michael kissed her forehead again and again. "You're glowing," he whispered. "I've never seen you look so happy." Evelyn wanted to scream. But she smiled for the camera. Because smiling had always been easier than telling the truth. That night, in the hotel suite, Evelyn stood by the mirror. She traced her own face with trembling fingers, trying to recognize the girl staring back. Was this what happiness looked like? Was this what her mother had felt, hiding truths so deeply they rotted inside? Michael came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "You're mine now," he whispered playfully. Evelyn's heart sank. Because no one really belonged to anyone, not when secrets this big existed. The honeymoon in Barcelona was supposed to be a dream. Michael booked the most expensive suite with a view of the city. They drank wine on balconies, kissed under old cathedrals, wandered through markets like children with no pasts. But Evelyn couldn't shake it. Her father's voice. That photo. The quiet guilt clawing at the back of her mind every time Michael said, "I love you." At night, she faked sleep. During the day, she faked joy. She was becoming her mother in real time, stitching silence into every smile. Until the letter arrived. They had just come back from the beach. Evelyn was drying her hair when she noticed the envelope on the bed, cream-colored, no return address. Her name written in careful cursive. She opened it. Inside, a single line. "We cannot bury what was never dead. P." Her breath caught. Her knees buckled. She dropped the letter like it burned her. Michael walked in a moment later, shirt half-buttoned. "Everything okay?" She nodded, shoved the letter under a towel. "Yeah. Just tired." That night, she tore the note into 1,000 pieces and flushed them one by one. But she couldn't flush what it meant. He was still watching. Still judging. Still in love with the past. When they returned to the States, Evelyn changed. Little things at first, forgetting to answer texts, staring too long at nothing, losing weight. Michael tried to reach her, but she always smiled and said, "I'm just adjusting." She was unraveling. On their 2-month anniversary, Michael planned a dinner. Candles. Homemade lasagna. Music from their first date. Evelyn sat across from him, hollow and haunted. "I don't know where you've gone," Michael said finally, voice cracking. "But I miss you. I miss my wife." She dropped her fork. Stood. Walked to the window. And whispered. "There's something you don't know." Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She lay awake beside Michael, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. The silence between them was a canyon now, deep, dark, and bottomless. The truth was coiled inside her chest like a venomous snake waiting to strike. But every time she tried to open her mouth, her throat closed shut. How could she tell him? How could she say that the man who married them was her father? That the vows they shared were tainted with a secret so cruel it felt like a curse? So she made a decision. She wouldn't tell him the truth. She would leave it in a letter. At dawn, she slipped out of bed. Wrote a note on hotel stationery. "Michael, I love you. I truly do. But there are things in this world that can't be fixed, only survived. You didn't do anything wrong. You just didn't know. Forgive me for never telling you. But I couldn't let our love become a battlefield for sins that were never yours. I will always be yours in the life where I was whole. Evelyn." She folded the paper carefully, kissed it once, and placed it under his wedding ring on the nightstand. Then she left. No one heard from Evelyn for weeks. Her phone was off. Her social media vanished. Her job said she quit without notice. Michael filed a missing persons report, but there were no leads. No credit card activity. No travel records. It was like she had disappeared into the wind. Until one day, Michael received a letter. No return address. No postmark. Inside, a photograph. Evelyn, standing in front of a small chapel in a remote village in southern France. Holding a candle. Eyes hollow. A new name written across the back. Marie Laurent. Michael stared at the image for hours. He didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just sat there, reading her note again and again. The one she had left behind. And he realized something. He had never truly known the woman he married. Evelyn had returned to where it all began. She sought out her father. Not to reconcile. Not to forgive. But to confront the thing that had devoured her life from the inside. She waited outside the church until he finished his evening prayers. When he stepped out, she was there in the shadows. "You followed me," he said, startled. "No," she replied. "I came to end something." Their argument lasted hours. She demanded answers. Why hadn't he told her sooner? Why did he choose to marry her off knowing the truth? Why did he watch in silence as she walked into a life poisoned by his sin? His eyes were full of pain, but not regret. I thought I was protecting you, he whispered. I didn't want to lose you again. You never had me, she snapped. You had a lie. A silence. A ghost. That night, she wrote a second letter. This one she addressed to no one. She walked into the woods behind the church and burned it. And as the ashes rose, so did something inside her, something bitter, something cold, something free. She would not return. Not to Michael. Not to the life she had before. Because once a truth is buried too deep, it starts to rot everything around it. Michael never remarried. Years passed. He moved cities. Changed jobs. But some nights, when the wind was just right, he thought he could smell roses and hear the faint echo of an organ playing. He kept Evelyn's letter in a locked drawer. And sometimes he'd take it out and read the last line again. I will always be yours in the life where I was whole. But that life never came. And that truth, like hers, was buried in silence. Not all confessions are spoken. Some are burned. Some are buried. And some live on in the silence between two people who once believed in forever. If this story left you breathless, don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We open the doors to secrets most people never dare to touch.